everybody hear me? My name is Terry Johnson. I'm the president of the Board of Education for Margaretville Central School. Our board has invited you all here this evening for an informational session on shared services and collaboration between school districts. As many of you know, or as all of you probably know, our superintendent has retired. We will be having an interim superintendent starting on November 3rd. We are here to look at the possibility and the idea of possibly sharing a superintendent as well as other services. So, as I like to put it, up to and including a superintendent. As I said, tonight is strictly an informational only session. We'll be hearing some speakers this evening. Nick Saban from BOCES will be starting us off. There will be no action taking tonight. This is not an official board meeting of the Margaretville Central School. This is, again, strictly informational. I'll turn it over to Nick, who will start our presentation.
Okay. I may give a try to this. This way I don't have to struggle, or if I can feel like I am so through. I'm very happy to assist the Margaretville Board of Education. For those that do not know, one of the duties of a district superintendent is to assist school boards of education in a search for a superintendent. I have a very unique position in New York State. Half of my job is to work with the BOCES, which I do. Superintendent of the BOCES, not unlike the superintendent you have. The other part of my job is to work with the Commission of Education. And by working with the school boards, it's under that particular part of my job that I am going with those responsibilities, discussing and out and afternoon, day by day. So we're going to find out. The collaboration and sharing, there's a lot more going on than people may realize. I'm going to talk a little about that this evening. I have a few slides, and the reason why I put it together, I think the Margaretville Board of Education is going to make it available on your website. This way people that do not make the meeting at least have an opportunity to take a look at some of the information that I'll present this evening. They very much wish to have a sense of the community's feeling with regard to the manner in which they might share within the schools. This evening, Terry has covered a lot of this. Basically, they had an interest superintendent. The school board would have a willingness to explore alternatives. In this evening's presentation, I'm going to cover some sharing that is currently going on. And by no means is it a complete list. I had taken, I had asked the superintendent to share with me some of the sharing things that are happening. And I can only fit a number of things in each category. There's a lot of sharing going on. Then what happened is 3 neighboring schools, Andes, Margaretville, and Roxbury, had an interest in at least having conversations and learning a little bit about sharing. So you have representatives from each of those schools here this evening with the thought that, should there be sharing, do those possibilities work within those two schools? And really, basically, you have to take a look at needs that the schools may have, and if you go down that path, what makes sense, and over what period of time. There are a few variables here that would have to be discussed. It's not something that anyone would know, anyone would not know, but really, I just want to put in context some of the reasons why you might be down the road of sharing. Education's mission, preparing students to be college and career ready. That is very public when you hear about education. You want to have effective and participating citizens in a democratic republic, as well as productive members of society. Schools, have curriculums and programs, and they have a financial plan to support these missions. And there's other things that are done, but this is the gist of what the school needs to do. The governance teams have an obligation to develop and implement what they believe is an appropriate to exceptional education program for the students to fulfill this mission. And why collaborate? This really is the crux of what boards have to be faced with in terms of some of the challenges they would have. When a governance team recognizes that they will struggle to achieve their mission independently, they have an obligation to find a means to accomplish the mission collectively to maintain and increase student opportunities as well as secure fiscal efficiencies. We have had a lot of external forces right now acting upon schools. You've had GPA, we've had the New York State government had taken monies away from schools in order to balance their own budget. And this is something that has been a struggle for schools, and this has happened for quite a number of years. Schools are still operating with less money than they had in 08-09, most schools. And that's been a struggle for schools, so you wind up having that as a challenge. Declining enrollment, property tax levy caps. There's a number of external forces that have caused school boards to have to think a little bit differently. Collaboration is not new. It's been happening all along. I'm going to talk a little about that. And recently, it's more a question of scale. Are schools collaborating enough? It's not that they're not collaborating, they are. But are they collaborating enough? And that's something that they need to answer to themselves. What's at stake? Our students are competing globally. Skills trump proximity. When I was in school, quite a while ago, more than not, and many of you in the audience may do the same thing. Not that I'm saying anyone's old here. But your competition sat next to you in school. If you wish to work in town, the person sitting next to you may have been your competition. Today, our students are competing globally. If an employer has a difficult time, I may start soon. If an employer has a difficult time finding the right employee with the right skill sets, there are times when they say to themselves, we'll just go to the global market. I have two daughters that work in companies that routinely work with employees of their own company that live in India, Africa, France, Vancouver, up in Canada. They're all part of the same company, and on a weekly basis, their meeting and their work is conducted via the internet. And these are employees that are assisting each other. No longer do we have to hire somebody that has that proximity. So we're preparing our students for the world in which they're going to work. We're getting them ready for a global environment. The importance of that is, if a school is struggling, okay, this is going to be a problem. I'm going to have to speak up. If the school is struggling to assist their students, they have to make the calculation. I was trying that, it wasn't working. They're going to have to make the calculation. If they're going to struggle to assist their students independently, they still should assist their students. They may need to do that collectively. So that's the calculation that school boards are going to have to make. And communities, in terms of how they assist their students. The ever-changing business climate has different expectations. It is global. There is more of an emphasis in technology and STEM. Schools are having to make different types of investments. These are all the challenges that schools are facing. There is an increase in education providers. There are people wishing to educate students, whether it's private business, charter schools. There is a movement afoot for people to say, we think we can do it better than public schools. It's the focus that we now have on what is being asked of our students as they enter the job market. So there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of stresses. Homeschooling with online access, it's been reported, and I do not know specifically if this is true, but it has been reported the fastest growing school in the United States is homeschools. That there are more and more homeschoolers because people have access to coursework via online. So there's a lot of different things that school boards are contending with. The collaborative challenges that school boards have, contractual obligations, impediments, or restrictions, is the negotiation process being used to remove barriers? So I think there's going to have to be a lot of conversation. Loyalty to longtime employees. Is it possible to protect employees and still find a way to have collaboration? I am not looking to try to have us add to the economic problems in the region. I don't think any of the school board members are. But we're going to have these conversations if we need to do some collaboration so that we can do both. Try to find a way to be able to enhance what we do and try to utilize the resource that we have. You wait for natural breaks in service, what we have right now, it's a thing that people are trying to take advantage of. Community expectations of independence. These are things that people have an interest. They have had a feeling about their school, and it is a community center. All the board members get that. And it's just, these are things that people have to talk about in terms of still preparing students for the world in which they're going to live and work. And if the resources are getting very difficult for them to do independently, they have an obligation to try to find some collective means, some collaborative means of making this work. There are political considerations. It does affect morale. Very important to have these conversations, have everyone informed, and try to find a very collective and collaborative way to be able to assist students as we go forward. These are all the things that schools are wrestling with. Taking a look at shared examples, what I had done is that I had asked the superintendents to send me, this was in the summer, because I had a presentation that I had made in August, similar to what I'm doing now. And what I did is I pulled a few off on each slide, just to give you an example of things that have just happened fairly recently. Stanford and Jefferson share a music teacher. Roxbury, Stanford had shared home and careers. Evanston and Mount Margaretville. Take a look. Evanston is on here a number of times, and I did that purposely. As they were losing students and had teachers who were leaving through retirements, they're very loyal to their staff, like most of our schools are. They started taking advantage of trying to have different ways of collaborating, and they actually are collaborating through a number of different BOCES. Evanston with Mount Margaretville for a librarian, Herkimer BOCES. With GMU for business, ONC BOCES. With GMU for technology, DCMO BOCES. With Brookfield for math, OHM BOCES. And then you had Worcester and Evanston, Spanish through online. So that's one school to give you a sense. They were running into some financial difficulties. Through their natural breaks, they found ways to be able to have a lot of ways to keep programming for students and just utilize the host of different partners with a host of different BOCES to be able to make that happen. And I supported that effort when I spoke to their superintendent, because our goal is to help the students. And if we need to find different ways to do that, oh well, let's see if we can do that. In terms of shared staff, this year, for the first time, the Director of Facilities, Stanford and Jefferson, have a Director of Facilities that they're sharing half and half between Stanford and Jefferson. That came on this year. Cooperstown and Milford, a cafeteria manager. Geneva, Charlotte Valley, and Andes have done a cafeteria manager. Theirs is through BOCES. The other one they just did on their own. Both perfectly fine. They had natural breaks. People had retired, not unlike what you have here. And someone said, my goodness, before we go down this road and have loyalty to another employee, is there another way for us to meet this need? And let's try to find something collaborative. So these are things that you have seen. Cooperstown, Oneonta, physical therapist. Some other shared services. Many, if not almost all schools, share transportation in some fashion. They help pick up students, take them to different places. That has been happening for quite some time. Stanford and Charlotte Valley are working on a shared transportation maintenance agreement. They're doing that as we speak. Lawrence and Morris did some stuff with some collaborative assessment, or grading assessments. Transportation services at Lawrence, they did some training, physical performance tests. They were trying to help others. Cooperstown and Richfield Spring, transportation supervisor for their 19A certification. Milford, Lawrence, Charlotte Valley, and Skenevis, a core initiative, ways in which they can try to work with some more STEM programming and allow adults to be able to get some instruction. Cooperstown and Skenevis for this year are sharing a business office. This is the first year it started. And I'm sure there's going to be some things to have to work out, but these are the kinds of things that are happening. Roxbury and the town of Roxbury. Rock salt the floors, as Tom explains it. We clean the town garage offices, they give us free rock salt. People are starting to talk about different ways in which they can assist their budget. Greater Roxbury Learning Initiative Corporation in Roxbury, construction of a community-based center for the school. Margaretville is working with Ulster BOCES for some ESL work. Andes has entered a municipal agreement with the town of Andes to combine for fuel services. So all vehicles are going to be fueled at one particular place. Lawrence is looking to enter into a municipal agreement with the fire commissioners to do the same thing that Andes was doing. So what you see is people doing things. Now, I've been in this BOCES since 1992. I was a principal at Stanford for 9 to 10 years before being a superintendent. I had not seen a lot of this until the last 5 years or so, right? Getting near that recession that we had. We're not quite out of it yet. But then all of a sudden, people have been having to get creative. They recognize they still wish to support their students, and they're having to struggle to do it independently. So to find collective means to be able to do that. Very appropriate planning, in my view. South Courtright, Gilboa, professional development on handwriting without tears. Margaretville working with Ulster BOCES again for AP courses. Tony's doing that with Margaretville right now. Evanston and Unadilla Valley is sharing alternative education. Jefferson and Stanford doing universal pre-K. ONC BOCES will be starting, I just had a meeting this morning, to take a look at a regional high school of sorts for seniors that never have to leave their school. We believe we're going to get a grant that's going to allow us to try to have a college-type program on distance learning where students do not leave their school, have access to college courses, and so we're trying to have collaboration without having to actually physically move people around, finding a means to do it through service and through school, through instruction. So again, looking very creatively at ways to assist students. So when you take a look at these lists that I've just provided, there's a number of different ways that people are looking at collaboration. We don't have to look at it. Never use the word merger, right? No one's used the word merger. No one's looked at it. My belief is each of the schools need their community school anchor. But it doesn't mean we can't still share or find ways to do things differently, at least at a high school level. You know, can we find ways to assist students? The world they're going to enter is requiring them to do more. We need to step up and make sure that our students can compete with anyone around the world. That's what our charge is. And I know that the staffs of all of our schools, the school board members, the administrative teams, they get this, and they want to make sure we can. We have had some struggles with some of the finances. So we need to be creative and find ways to work collaboratively. Athletics. I was shocked when I read some of these, because this is sometimes the big bugaboo, right? My goodness, our team can't go near someone else's team. South Courtright and Andes, they share almost every sport. Morris and GMU do track. Lauren has a color guard. They've had different schools participating. Right now it's Unitigo. Skenevis and Worcester do track. Charlotte Valley and South Courtright do track. Get this one. Cherry Valley Springfield, where I was superintendent, and Sharon Springs share all modified sports. Sharon Springs goes to Cherry Valley Springfield for every modified sport. So what you have are people recognizing that if we are going to struggle to field a team, we still want our students to have that experience. What is it that we're willing to do to make that happen? And some of these things, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, these were bugaboos. These were things that were unlikely to happen. People are just willing to look at things differently to make sure the students have the experiences they believe they should have. Stanford and Gilboa, track and field. So I wanted to end just a little bit with some of the shared services that are happening right now. I'm going to see if there are any questions that I can answer, and then I want to introduce John Evans. I told him before, he's the rock star of the evening. He is a shared superintendent. You may have more interest in some of the things that he's doing, but I did want to give you an opportunity to have a sense a lot's going on in terms of people sharing. Is there any questions that I could answer now? And if not, you can let me escape here. That's great. And then I'm going to turn it over to John. Is there a question?
Yeah, if you went back a few slides when you talked about some shared academic services, I understand there are some teachers that are shared by districts, but when you had the bottom part of the slide and it said like business through ONC BOCES, can you explain to me how that's happening through BOCES, those things on the bottom? I think it's like the third slide. No?
What they had done, Skinny-Evis, now, take this with a grain of salt because I do not know the specifics. So I want to make sure that what I tell you, conceptually, Skinny-Evis had people that are retiring, leaving, and what they would say, and they also did some work with BOCES in terms of their business operations, and what they had done was to work with Cooperstown to where Cooperstown now is doing their payroll.
No, this was
Go back one
like,
more.
Oh, one back, oh, I'm sorry.
Keep going.
Okay,
That
there you go.
okay.
So,
One more?
I guess the ones
No.
that are through ONC BOCES or DCM BOCES, technology, for example, or business or math or
Yes, those are teachers.
So how is that through DL or what?
No, what these are, with Evanston, they have a business teacher that might be AM for them, and then they go to GMU and PM.
Oh, so the teacher shared through both.
It's a shared teacher, right? These are, if you look at the top, that's
So
shared
it's
teacher.
just like this. Okay.
So they have, and it's almost always an AM, PM. The difficulty with sharing a teacher, Roxbury has done this a little bit with Stanford, is that you have to make sure that that's, the travel works, right? That someone can teach some classes at one facility, one school, and then be able to get to another school and make it work within a day.
When it says through ONC BOCES,
To always be both as employees.
That's it, that's what I was saying. That's really, that's,
They are BOCES employees.
Yeah, I somehow thought that the kids were going to BOCES.
No, when the business teacher retired at Evanston, and they are faced with the same decision that Margaretville is, we have retirement, a natural break. What should we do in terms of moving forward? So what had happened was they had explored, can we do a share? And I believe Mount Markham, I'm sorry, did I get the right one? No, business, GMU, would have said, I have a business teacher. We've also lost some students. I don't need them full-time, let's do a share. Most of the shares, one of the schools may have the teacher. I can speak and give you a great example. When I was at Cherry Valley Springfield, I had a home and careers teacher, and our school was losing a lot of students. I did not need them full-time. And Richfield Springs had a break in service. They did not need it full-time. I asked then Marie Wiles, who was the DS of ONC, is it possible to share this position through BOCES? The answer was yes. My teacher became a BOCES teacher and then provided service for my school and for Richfield Springs. And that's basically how that happens. One of the schools likely has the teacher and is willing to share. Any other questions? Yep.
So when a teacher is a BOCES employee now, do they lose things like their years of service and things like that?
The law is very specific about that, so that they don't lose any of their years of service. Everything would come over for them. So when the salary is figured, all of that stuff comes with them. Now the salary could be a little higher, could be a little lower, because it's actually based on the contract of the new place. So if the contract for BOCES would be higher, the person actually get a raise. If the contract's a little lower, it's going to be a little lower. But I think what's happened is all the people that I know that are doing this, their goal is to assist students, protect the teacher, and still keep the classes going. So the law is very specific about how that happens. It's called a takeover. So, and there's very specific things that have to be followed. Any other questions? I am going to turn it over to John Evans, and he will continue. In case they forget who you are.
As Nick said, my name is John Evans, and I'm currently the superintendent at both Roscoe and Downsville. I'm in my second year of doing that, and this whole thing kind of came about from a lot of the stuff that Nick is talking about. At Roscoe, when I started there in 2009, my superintendent secretary at the time had been there for 28 years. I was the 19th superintendent she'd worked with in those 28 years. In Downsville, when I started there last year, or a year and a half ago, I was the 6th superintendent in Downsville in a 4-year span. So something that's not unique to my two schools, and is something some of your communities have probably experienced, is small rural schools tend to be stepping stones and places that experience a lot of administrative turnover. And it was that constant administrative turnover on the Downsville side that kind of led to the discussions with Roscoe about sharing a superintendent. Because they had gone through a couple. They had trouble finding a superintendent with experience, which they felt was some of the reasons some of the things were in turmoil. On the Roscoe side, we had gone through a couple of pretty tough years financially, with the tax cap and the economy kind of tanking. We cut some teachers back to part-time, and things were a little bit tight. So the idea of looking for creative ways to save money was something in the back of the minds of the board members on the Roscoe side. So kind of administrative turnover and finances were two of the things that kind of opened the door to this discussion of sharing a superintendent. That, coupled with it becoming legal through some legislative action in one of the budget sessions, is one of the governor's claimed ways of saving money and mandate relief and all that kind of stuff, kind of started all these discussions. Prior to discussing sharing the superintendent, our two school districts entered into some shared sports arrangements and shared the majority of our athletic programs. And that kind of opened the door to kind of me becoming somewhat known on the Downsville side and becoming a known entity and leading to further discussions. Over the last year and a half, I've spent a lot of time talking with some other shared superintendents. In fact, this weekend, two of us, along with another superintendent who just did his doctoral research on the concept of shared superintendents, are kind of having a similar discussion at the New York State School Boards Convention. And Jason Andrews, who's the superintendent in Windsor School District, just recently completed his doctoral work on, why schools would share a superintendent. And some of the key things that he found in doing his research is that in the schools that have successfully shared, they had similar things in common. One was the person being shared was well established in one of the districts already. In my case, I graduated from Roscoe in 1989. So I left the area, ended up coming back, and was kind of a known entity from the community, from the area. That was appealing on the Downsville side because I'm not an outsider. I'm from here. I'm a redneck that hunts. I have a lot of things in common with a lot of the folks in both of my school districts. So, that kind of made some of the conversations a little bit easier. Some of the other things that he found in his research were that a lot of the school districts that are doing this successfully were sharing things prior to entering into a shared superintendent arrangement. In a lot of cases, it was athletics. And, I'm a firm believer that, having lived this for a year and a half, and I was just talking to, Dr. Sweeney before we came in about our smooth start of the school year, the majority of the issues that I have are athletics related. So, and that really has nothing to do with me being a shared superintendent. It just makes it a little bit easier to iron it out because I'm only talking to myself. Because I'm not having to deal with another superintendent and worry about whose coach it was and whose parents were out of control, and just these are all mine. So it's my problem to fix. But, sharing sports, that's a real biggie. And I know some of you have done that, in various flavors. On the Roscoe side, in my time back in Sullivan County, not so much as the superintendent at Roscoe, but in the last 12 or so years, Roscoe's shared sports with almost every school in Sullivan County in some way, shape, or form. And the reason for that is the community and the board has had a long-standing belief in that it's about opportunities for kids. And if we can't put together a program and we have kids that want it, we're going to find a way to make that happen. And being a really small school, that's usually easy because when you combine schools for athletics, you combine enrollments, and there's been some recent changes where you're not taking the total enrollment, so it doesn't always bump somebody up a class. So our low enrollment wasn't bumping anybody up. So at times we had students from Jeffersonville, before they became Sullivan West, playing on Roscoe football teams. We've had kids go to Tri-Valley for track. We've had a number of different things that we shared with Livingston Manor. And at one point, when I first started at Livingston Manor, the two boards had met. We had shared football for 7 years. They had decided that they were going to try and enter into a larger sharing agreement. But the M word kept coming up, the dreaded merger thing. And that kind of is what put the whole kibosh on the larger sports sharing thing. Roscoe went into it. We had a bunch of public meetings just like this in both Roscoe and Livingston Manor, and talked about combining all of our sports teams, and that we're not talking about merging schools, we're talking about combining sports. That kind of somewhere twisted around and turned into more of a let's look at the schools thing, which Roscoe wasn't really interested in doing, and then the whole thing kind of fell apart. But that prior sharing and a strong connection to one of the two communities were the two biggest ones, and the third one was perceived cost savings. And the key word is perceived. Because like I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons Roscoe looked at this was, to save money. We had gone through some pretty tough budget seasons. I had cut back some teachers to part-time, which, as a new superintendent was real fun. I was the first person that had to do that in, 15 years. So on paper, when we came into this, it looks like Roscoe is saving, in the neighborhood of $50,000, Downsville in the ballpark of 45-ish, and we are, but those savings are short-lived. So if the driving factor for two school districts to look at sharing a superintendent is money, you need to look bigger than that. Because after the first year or two, that savings is reallocated someplace else. So it's not a continued savings every year, because that money it saves something in one place or the other. It might save part of a teaching job, or an athletic program, or a tractor. And after that, it kind of, just gets sucked up into the budget, and,
it's gone. So the money factor is not the big thing. What it is stability and leadership and someone who wants to go crazy and run back and forth a lot. Just kidding. But I'll get to that part of it. But, those are the three big things. Stability and leadership, perceived savings, and the ability to share other things. What it's done for my two districts is things have seemed to calm down in Downsville a little bit. I haven't been run out of town yet, so that stability piece seems to be working for now. It might be short-lived, who knows. And on the Roscoe side, I have been approached several times by different school districts in Sullivan County. Roscoe is the smallest school in Sullivan County. And as different superintendent positions opened up, I was approached by board members to apply for those jobs. I didn't apply for any of them, but those conversations got back to my Board of Education on the Roscoe side, and all of them were in a panic that, I'm going to leave. I had no intentions to, but that opened the door to, if we share, we'll make a little bit more money, we'll stay longer. So, there was that kind of piece of it. So for me, I looked at it as, an opportunity for, professional growth and something that would, on my resume, make me a little more employable other than just being the superintendent of the smallest school in Sullivan County. With the conversations that have been taking place in Albany the last couple of years about forced consolidation and regional high schools and all of these other things that, as small rural schools, sometimes make us a little bit concerned because it's somebody other than us making those decisions, and we're just stuck to live with them. So that being in the back of my mind, coupled with I was going to make a few more bucks, is one of the reasons that I agreed to try this. And we entered into it as a trial on a one-year basis, and we renewed it last July as another one-year renewal, and it's kind of right now a one-year at a time kind of thing, because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the folks in Albany are going to do and how crazy things are going to get. And from my side of the fence, I go back and forth almost daily on whether I like being shared superintendent or not. Usually when it's, one of those days where your phone's ringing off the hook and it's never because someone wants to tell you what a great job you're doing. Those days I think to myself, I was just in one district. I would have only had 2 pissed off people call me today instead of 4. So is it really worth the extra aggravation? So that part of it, I kind of wrestle with back and forth. But I came into this already having a job and being in a position where I could have conversations with both boards that were pretty open and honest about, what I thought this might look like and what I thought it might mean. And the first conversation that I had on the Downsville side is, why the hell won't anybody stay here? I would be, if I do this, the 6th superintendent in, 5 years. What's going on that's making, things not last here? And the board was very honest, said we've had some issues as a board, and we've made it, kind of challenging. But the interim superintendent at the time, Charlotte Gregory, and if any of you know Mrs. Gregory, she's been the superintendent for 30 years, I think. Almost longer than I've been alive. So, Charlotte has this kind of grandmotherly mother air about her and did a really good job of kind of working with the Downsville Board of Education to make them a really great group of folks to work with for me. So, and I appreciate that, and I tell Charlotte that all the time. But, so I was able to say to the Downsville Board, why would I want to come here? Why won't anybody say? And, that opened the door for some pretty open and honest conversations about what my expectations were and about what their expectations were. I was also very upfront with both boards in that the only way this could work is if the 10 of them, the 5 in Roscoe and the 5 in Downsville, 100% believe in this idea. Because if every single one of them doesn't think that sharing a superintendent is the best thing since sliced bread, it's not going to work. Because if one person doesn't think it's the right thing, and they're not going to support it in their community and at meetings, it's going to be a nightmare for the person doing it. And it's not going to last. So, you know, I explained to them that if you guys aren't 100% behind this, don't do it. And the other part of it was, I'm a father and I have 4 kids. In a small rural school, communities expect their superintendent to be at everything under the sun. We are the face of the district. You know, we are usually the highest paid person in the community. And, you know, that sense of, we're paying you the big bucks, so you're going to be at all the games. You're going to be at every basketball game. You're going to be at every soccer game because, you know, all of our folks in the communities are paying your salary and they want to see you there. They want to see what you're getting for their money. And part of the conversation was, as a father, I can't be at everything under the sun in your 2 school districts and still be a father. So the expectation coming in was the other administrators in the school district are going to have to play a role in this. Because I can't be 2 places at once, and I can't do everything. You know, even though conceptually I'm part-time in both districts, it's 2 100% full-time jobs. Because the superintendent is the person that's ultimately responsible for everything that happens in the school district. Even if parts of it are delegated, the bottom line is when, you know, it hits the fan, it's the superintendent that's responsible to fix it, and the one who's going to be blamed for whatever went wrong. Because even if it was something that was delegated to a principal or to a business official, we're the ones ultimately responsible to clean up the mess and to take the responsibility. So, you know, we went into that kind of with the understanding that I'm not going to be at everything. You know, I will go to some stuff, but what I told both boards is if there's a game in Roscoe and a game in Downsville, and my kid has a game, I'm going to be at my kid's game. Because I would be a hypocrite if I sat there and said that, you know, we need to advocate for kids, but I wasn't there advocating for my own. So those were some of my conditions coming in, that both boards needed to be 100% on board, and if the boards and the communities could accept the concept of the superintendent not being the face of the district and being at everything under the sun, then it's something we can, you know, take a shot at. And so far it's worked. I mean, it's been challenging at times. I've juggled around a number of different ways on how I structure my day. And most recently, and kind of for the majority of the time we've been doing it, I spend a portion of each day in both districts. And the reason for that is part of what makes my situation a little bit challenging is Roscoe is in Sullivan BOCES in the Orange County Interscholastic Athletic League in Section 9, and Downsville is in DCMO BOCES in the Delaware Mountain League in Section 4. So there's nothing about my 2 districts in common except for me. Whereas, you know, everybody in this room, you guys are all in the same BOCES, you're all in the same league, you're all in the same section, so that, for this, from my seat, makes it a heck of a lot easier. Because each month in both BOCES, the DSs have DS meetings, and all the superintendents go. And those are things that you really can't delegate out to your principal. Because a lot of times the things that are discussed there, there's superintendent decisions that have to be made, or there's issues that are happening in school districts with principals or other district officials or teachers or whatever that principals want to, or superintendents want to bounce ideas off each other, and it doesn't really go so well if, you know, I send my principal and, you know, another district is having principal issues and wants to talk about those things. So, you know, those are things that you have to go to, and for me, it's twice. So having to go to everything double has made my time out of the district more than if it was just 2 school districts within the same BOCES. The other challenge for me is, and all of you probably know this very well, is in this area, there's no straight line between any place. So to get from my house in Livingston Manor to Otselic Valley is 2+ hours. You know, DCMO BOCES, their main offices are in Norwich. That is not close. And there's no straight line to get there. So the time, you know, if I have to go to a meeting in Norwich, by the time I drive to Norwich, have the meeting and drive back, the day's gone. So if I had a Downsville meeting on Tuesday, I'm not in either building on Tuesday. And if something happens for Roscoe on Wednesday, and I'm not in either building for Roscoe on Wednesday, then that's 2 days